Hi, I'm Phil. I'm going to show you how I make sourdough. This is inspired by my friend Sam, who recently did a video like this, and I thought, oh man, I've been making sourdough for a while. I'll share my recipe too. This is my culture. I started a few years ago when I was in a CSA, and I would get a bunch of vegetables, and I would, in order to preserve like cabbage and stuff like that, I'd make a sauerkraut. And the juice from that sauerkraut is what I used to start this starter a couple of years ago. And so I've probably killed it off once or twice in the past and restarted it in much the same way. So it's not some sort of like fancy heirloom sourdough. Can talk more about that later. But this has been out of the fridge for a little while, like a day or so. Oftentimes it comes straight out of the fridge and straight into a new loaf. So I'll just mix it up here real quick. It smells pretty stinky, which is how it's supposed to. It was bubbling away. It's not crazy. It's not a super active culture. I do everything by grams. I had read in my readings about bread that this is what serious bakers do, so I started trying to do it too. This is going to be 445 grams of hot tap water. So just out of the tap, hot to the touch, but not like scalding or anything. That helps the yeast, especially when it's coming straight out of the fridge. So that's approximately like 2 cups or so. And then this winds up being somewhere in the ballpark of like 100 grams, maybe 120 grams of the starter. Depends on how active I think it is, what time of year it is. So I'll go with like, I don't know, 120-ish or 130. It's not super precise. I don't think this matters a whole lot for my level of baking. When I say it matters what time of year it is, it will tend to, like, I tend to keep my house pretty cold in the winter, and so the rising process will be slow, and the starter just won't be that active. Sometimes in those situations I'll spike it with a little bit of yeast. But for right now, I'll just like pour in some of that starter, mix it so that it's dissolved into the water. I might choose to grab a little sugar or something like that and sprinkle that in to help wake it up. It's about to get fed with a bunch of flour, so it'll be fine. So that'll start to wake up over a couple of minutes while I'll gather my dry ingredients. So that was 445 grams of water, about 120 or 130 grams of starter. This recipe I'm using is adapted kind of halfway between there's a famous New York Times no-knead recipe from, I think Mark Bittman is the name of the chef or the baker that originated it. And heavily inspired by Michael Pollan's book Cooked, where he talks about the tartine loaf. I forget who it is that came up with that tartine bakery, I guess in San Francisco. But Michael Pollan waxes poetic about it and talks about his development of his recipe. So this is going to be, like Michael Pollan, he goes for mostly whole wheat, and that was really attractive to me. So this is going to be 350 grams of whole wheat. And then 150 grams of, just for me, just basic all-purpose flour. Some people would use bread flour, or if you have like pizza dough flour, like 00 or whatever, cool. I tend to not be super uptight about the makeup of the flour. The bread's going to be great no matter what, for the most part. I have some chickpea flour up there that I sometimes will mix in. I tend to bring it up to about 500 grams though, every time. 500 grams total. So there's my flours. Salt. Most recipes about this size might go for like a teaspoon of salt, but I'm trying to cut back on my sodium, so I'm going to go with like a half teaspoon for this loaf. I don't find that the salt from a flavor perspective is very important. Apparently it has some sort of role to play in slowing down the fermentation process. I don't know. So I put a little salt in there because that's what you do, I guess. And then comes in some mix-ins. So that's pretty much done there. Actually, before I forget, I do like a little bit of olive oil. I don't usually rarely measure this. I kind of eyeball it, and maybe that's a tablespoon or two. Quarter cup is kind of pushing it, but you can get away with it. What that does for me is fat tastes delicious, cool. But it also, what it does is it makes the dough or the bread, when it's done, it seems like it lasts longer. Like it stays softer longer, which makes it sort of resist feeling like it's stale if you're not eating it super fast. So a little bit of oil really helps with that. So I'll put that in there too, into the liquid. This is now flour, salt, and then I will throw in some mix-ins here. I really like flax seeds to get omega-3s. So put in about a quarter cup of that. That takes me to 35 grams of that. I generally am going to wind up mixing in approximately 100 grams of stuff. The other one that I tend to feature a lot of is amaranth seeds. I absolutely love, I love the crunch, and I love the sort of nutty smell that they have. So it'll be amaranth seeds, solid quarter cup of that. Takes me to 71 grams of extra stuff. What the heck? 75 grams there of extra stuff. These seeds might be starting to go. They smell pretty right. Sunflower seeds, because what the heck? A few of those. If I am doing sunflower seeds, which is not every time, I tend to not just a light touch of those, because they're relatively large. And then I'm going to put in some oats, round it out. There will be oats all over the top of this thing, so oats in the dough, sure, whatever. I don't wind up noticing them in the texture of the dough. So this is my dough whisk, which I got for buying a bunch of yeast and saving up the box tops or whatever of all the yeast. Then you can send it in for free with shipping and handling dough whisk, and I absolutely love this thing. I've been saving up all my box tops again to order myself a new one for when this one dies. It's just the best way, unless you have like a mixer or something like that, which I try to avoid. I like mixing things by hand, and I like utensils that I can use for many things and are small, which this is all of those. So I absolutely love this dough whisk. So I'll mix this in. Anytime I'm mixing dry into wet, I like to go really staged. So really like mix it in fully before I move on to mixing in anything more. So I like to see that kind of start to look kind of smooth in there. And maybe another day I should film this from above. Okay, so as I start to scrape it up here, you can see it starts to pull the remaining flour off the sides of the bowl. already smells really like earthy, grainy, nutty. And as I start to like work it over here, I can see that it starts to act a little bit like a single mass. But we're pretty much done here with the mixing. Grab a spatula. And we'll scrape all of this into the smaller of my mixing bowls here. And I like to kind of bring it together into a single ball. And just a little bit. Great. Cover this up with a lid, and I will let this sit essentially overnight. It's just about noon on Saturday, so I'll bake this tomorrow morning. But this is pretty much the prep process. Okay, so it's the next morning, and the dough has risen from previously it was down there to filling the bowl almost all the way. Looks pretty good. The top of it here is got like a little bit of a watery sheen to it, and you can see as you move it around, it doesn't move too much, which is good. Sometimes if it's over risen, you'll see the dough starts to get a little bit liquid looking. So this is good to go. That was like a 17-18 hour rise. Go ahead and flour my surface here. And what I've got is I've got as a work surface set up here, and I'm going to try to as gently as possible, pull the dough out of the bowl while leaving it as intact as possible. All those like bubbles that are in there from the fermentation process, I want to leave those as intact as possible. So just try to gently coax it out of the bowl. Okay, so I wash the bowl so that I can put it back into the bowl as soon as I'm done manipulating it here. It's just been sitting here for a second. Give a little flour. I give a little flour just around the edges here, but I'm going to fold this over one time. Go this way. One time, like that. And now I just want to sort of like work it around on the flour until it becomes like a ball. Like that. Pretty good there. It's covered in flour. There's a surface, there's an exterior to it. I'm going to pick it up and flip it onto this pillowcase that I use for this job. Pillowcase is covered with just oatmeal. So put it on there. Perfect. Put the pillowcase in the bowl, and it will be proofing here, or rising again, or whatever, for some small number of minutes. So I usually just put it in there, center it in the bowl, and fold this over. And let this rise while the oven preheats. There's a cast iron Dutch oven in the oven right now, getting up to 450 degrees. I've learned that the cast iron likes to be preheated with lid off of it, because then if there's any smoke from any oil that's in the cast iron because of using it before, the smoke will come out. Otherwise you open it up and it's just like this smoke bomb that you open up into your kitchen. So I'll go ahead and get this. Now when we look at the bread here, you can see there's all the oats from before are on the sides and the bottom, but not the top. I want this top here to become the bottom of the loaves, because I want those oats on the top of the loaf just for aesthetics. So I'm going to take this out here and I'm going to flip it into the cast iron. That didn't go very well. We're way off on the side. It's usually what happens, but a little shaky. We'll center that up in there. Nice. Perfect. Let me grab the lid. Put the lid on there. We're going to bake this for 30 minutes with the lid on. That's 450 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 232 in Celsius. Okay, so here's the finished product. It came out of the oven. Looks great. Let me get a knife. It's been out for a few minutes. One of the things I like about this recipe is that it has gotten really consistent for me. So when I'm at home using all of my own home stuff, I have a very high degree of confidence that it's gonna come out this way. So we got our seeds and flaxy things in there, steam coming off. I'm gonna enjoy it. First slice this morning with a little bit of cream cheese and some raspberries. Tends to go pretty well with cream cheese or peanut butter, but everything goes well with peanut butter in my opinion. Stay on there, little buddy. Yeah, the crust gets nice and crispy and crunchy, and the interior of it is still pretty soft and spongy. You can see we get some half decent bubbles forming on the inside that we were careful about trying to preserve when we manipulated it earlier. So oats on the top, a few oats on the bottom. This is going to be a great loaf for the rest of the week. That's my bread.